Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thank you for spending part of your evening with us tonight. Now, CBC News has learned a promise by Windsor's mayor to create an anti-racism initiative 2 years ago still hasn't materialized. It has advocates calling it a failure at the municipal level. Plus, the Gordie Howe Bridge giving away $200,000 to local community groups. We also got an update on the bridge's completion time. And those pesky mayflies named after the month of May are still around mid-July. Good news is we're on the tail end of the season now. More than 2 years ago, the mayor promised to create an anti-racism initiative for the city. That initiative has not started, and now there's another delay in the process. One advocate says this sends the message that racial equality doesn't matter. The CBC's Jason Vio joins me live now with more. So, Jason, what exactly has happened here?
Well, we just learned that the city terminated its process to find a firm to create that anti-racism initiative. Why? They won't say, but we do know the goal with this initiative is to better address racism in the community. Now, the founding director of the Black Studies Institute at the University of Windsor calls what happened here a failure. Let's first start with, though, how we got here, because this isn't the first delay. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was killed by a white police officer who pressed his knee on the back of Floyd's neck, prompting outrage and protests around the world. The following year, in 2021, the mayor in Windsor allocated $200,000 towards this anti-racism initiative. City Council also supported it as a part of that year's budget. In the summer of 2021, Council agreed to give that money to the Multicultural Council of Windsor and Essex County to lead that initiative, but that organization quickly pulled out because it became political and divisive. At the time, the head of the city's diversity committee said the Multicultural Council doesn't have the knowledge necessary to create an anti-racism strategy. In May of 2022, the city posted a request for proposal on a website full of government contracts. Then just last month, CBC News learned the city canceled that RFP but isn't saying why.
I think it's important to note here that in 2020 and 2021, right, activists, those seeking community betterment, those seeking change, were deeply afraid that the things that were being said, that the lip service being paid, would not result in actual change.
In this case, no change has been made yet. The city tells CBC News the RFP will be reposted, but it will take time because we want to ensure we do it to promote the best possible outcomes. As the founding director of the Black Studies Institute at the University of Windsor, Natalie Delia-Deckard says she's deeply disappointed that it's been 2 years and still no anti-racism initiative in place.
My reaction to this event, right, is to know that it falls in a long line, right, decades of inaction and the way that we narrate that inaction. I'm not surprised.
She says it's another example of kicking the can down the road, getting credit for something at a time when Black Lives Matter protests rallied for change, and then not following up on that promise in a timely way. Deckard says it shows to her how much of a priority this is for the city and the mayor.
We're all feeling the same way, and that's that this doesn't ultimately matter. And I challenge anyone to disagree, because if it did matter, we would have invested the resources. We haven't.
Now, the mayor, supported by City Council, set aside $200,000 for this anti-racism initiative. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkin's office said he was unavailable for an interview today. In a brief statement, though, a spokesperson said he looks forward to seeing this initiative move forward with widespread public consultation, but that email didn't specify what public consultations are expected.
So, Jason, what does the advocate say about what happens next?
Well, Natalie Delia-Deckard with the Black Studies Institute says that starting from scratch in an instance like this can actually present an exciting opportunity. She's hopeful that the city doesn't just post it on that industry website again, but actually engages post-secondary institutions as an example who have people very knowledgeable about anti-racism, because she says something as important as this shouldn't be attached to profit for people in the private sector. Instead, better using public resources to improve our city.
Well, thank you so much for that, Jason.
Thanks, Meg.
The City Council has declared intimate partner violence a local epidemic. Councillor Joanne Geniak presented a motion with 86 recommendations to Council last night. The top one includes putting pressure on the provincial government to also declare an epidemic. Geniak says last year in Windsor, Essex, there were more than 2,300 intimate partner violence calls made to the police. She says there were more than 2,300 crisis calls to women's shelters. Geniak calling it a huge epidemic. How this move is something that Violence Against Women Coordinating Committee of Windsor, Essex asked for earlier this year. The push was reignited after Sarah Bule was killed. Police have charged her estranged husband with first-degree murder. Those charges have not been proven in court. Now, charges have been laid against a man police say stole a gun from an officer in Bell River last week. A 21-year-old man from Leamington is facing more than a dozen charges. It's connected to events that happened last Tuesday. Officers were called to Bell River for reports of a man acting erratically. Police allege that he ran toward officers while holding a weapon. The man then stole a firearm from an officer's vehicle and ran away. The OPP arrested him later that night. Ontario Special Investigations Unit is taking over the case. The man was arrested with serious injuries. Charges include assault with a weapon, disarming an officer, and failure to comply with a release order. Well, tonight we have an update on the completion date for the Gordie Howe Bridge. Officials believe they're back on schedule. The update coming at a funding announcement today with community organizations on both sides of the river receiving money. The CBC's TJ Deer has more.
As construction continues on the Gordie Howe International Bridge, the project received yet another schedule update. Bridge representatives are hoping crossings will take place by the end of next year.
We're trying to go as close to that date as possible, but we're still trying to see when we're going to be able to do it.
This comes after the CEO of Bridging North America said the bridge would be delayed a year until 2025. He said financial and supply chain impacts slowed construction, but that they're still moving forward. Today, the project manager says they're trying to get back on schedule.
Obviously, because we have an impact because of COVID. So we have been, sustained a big effort to try to mitigate all of those delays, and we're working with the WDBA to try to finalize the project as soon as possible.
Mendez said today that the towers of the bridge would be completed by the end of the summer, the back span would be finalized this week, and construction of the deck has extended over the river. Mendez's update comes as the Detroit-Windsor Bridge Authority announced the recipients of this year's funding pool of $200,000 through their community benefits plan. Successful applicants of organizations in Sandwichtown and the Delray community in southwest Detroit can receive up to $25,000 of funding. According to the Bridge Authority's Vice President of Corporate Affairs and External Relations, their neighborhood infrastructure strategy has $20 million of funding available, $10 million each for Canadian and American initiatives. To date, 80% of that $20 million has already been committed.
The initiative that we talked about today, the community organization investment, already we've invested $500,000 through that initiative, helping 40 distinct projects.
One of the successful applicants in Sandwich was the Journey Home Hospice, who received the maximum amount. The hospice serves Windsor-Essex patients experiencing homelessness or who live in vulnerable housing.
Journey Home Hospice Windsor is not funded by the government, unlike other hospices in Ontario. So we rely on organizations like theirs to provide funding for our patients and ensure we can provide services to people when they're most in need.
Next year will be the final year of funding through the Bridge Authority's Community Benefits Plan. TJ Deer, CBC News, Windsor.
The rising cost of living and health care, arguably two of the biggest concerns Canadians are facing. Premiers address both those issues today. They're meeting in Winnipeg for 3 days of talks and to pressure the federal government to help. Ashley Burke has the latest.
Good morning, Premier Ford.
Premiers are meeting with a new healthcare deal from Ottawa in hand. Now the question is, how will they coordinate spending billions in federal funding to address a system in crisis?
Alberta has one of the biggest problems when I look across the country at failing to create an environment in the workforce that nurses want to be in.
Alberta's premier says healthcare costs are increasing faster than the federal government's contributions, and provinces and territories need help bringing more healthcare workers into the country.
Part of it is having the federal government work with us to on the things that we need, which is a streamlined process for recruiting people from abroad, having them come into our system, into the professions that we need.
Don't sell off our health care.
Nearby, a rally to draw the Premier's attention to the problems. The National Association of Nurses also met directly with premiers.
There has to be a health human resource plan. They have to work with their employers and their unions to see how are we going to make sure we have enough nurses, doctors, healthcare workers in the next year, 5 years, 20 years.
Affordability, another top issue during Premier's talks today.
I'm really concerned about that. 8 out of 10 Canadians are concerned about the cost of living. Our government is, I'll give you an example. I'm out here, I always look at the gas prices. They're about $1.60, $1.57, same in Ontario. Just imagine if Ontario, for Ontarians, we never reduced it by 10 cents. I would love to see the federal government reduce their share, give people a break.
BC's Premier said skyrocketing housing prices can't be ignored.
Like other premiers around the table, I have a real sense of dread about the next Bank of Canada rate hike. I think that the impact on British Columbians is pretty profound. Our housing is already very significantly more expensive than other parts of the country.
In Canada's north, food prices are hitting new extremes.
The prices in our stores are incredible. Some communities are paying over $30 for a gallon of milk. So that is my biggest fear, is that our people are hungry.
These issues all feed into tomorrow's conversation about economic trade and growth. Some premiers are calling on Ottawa to help speed up infrastructure projects. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Winnipeg.
An attempt to have Roseanne Archibald reinstated as National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations has failed. Archibald was removed last month following allegations of bullying. AFN chiefs are holding their annual meeting in Halifax this week, and Archibald's supporters wanted to vote to bring her back, but the chiefs voted against putting it on the agenda. Archibald spoke to the meeting via teleconference.
It is a railroaded process that is unfair, that is not allowing for accountability for the political coup that happened against me by the regional chiefs.
Archibald had been calling for an audit of AFN finances, and the interim chief says they'll do that if a committee recommends a forensic audit. Now, a group of scientists is calling for the declaration of a new epoch, geological epoch. It's a period of time that spans millions of years and usually isn't identified until after it's over. The Jurassic period is a popular example of an epoch. Scientists say the new time period would be called the Anthropocene because it's driven by human activity, and a Canadian lake could provide some of the best evidence the human effect on the geological history of the Earth. CBC's Anayat Singh has the story.
Crawford Lake, about an hour west of Toronto, is pretty small, but very deep.
I'd heard about Crawford Lake in the past and kind of knew the history of what a special place this is.
Preserved in those depths is some of the best evidence of how humans have changed the Earth.
The thing with Crawford Lake, though, is we get these annual sediments in the bottom of the lake, very much like tree rings. And so we get these couplets of sediment being deposited in the lake on an annual basis. And so we can count back in time those couplets.
It's all part of an effort to declare a new geological time period, or epoch, usually marked by some major change, such as the extinction of the dinosaurs. This epoch could be the Anthropocene, an era marked by human activity. A group of scientists that have been advocating for a new epoch presented their case at a conference in Europe today.
Humankind is not just changing the planet, but destabilizing the Earth system.
So what you see in the image,
out of 9 potential sites around the world, it's Crawford Lake that's being proposed as a so-called golden spike, an ideal marker of a new epoch. In those soil layers are traces of plutonium from large-scale nuclear testing in the 1950s, a sign along with carbon emissions of the permanent way humans have transformed the Earth.
Now to have this as it's not only significant to us, to Halton region, but across Canada and across the world. You know, I think it's going to really make future visits and future programming very, very special here at the park.
But it's not yet a done deal. The Anthropocene has to pass multiple rounds of voting, and some aren't convinced you can name a new epoch while you're in it.
Whatever you try and define in terms of the Anthropocene means it's changing as you go along. And so some would argue that's not what the nomenclature is set up for.
Still, it's serving as a sign of our complex imprint on the planet, an exciting role for this little lake in the suburbs. Inayat Singh, CBC News, near Milton, Ontario.
Well, there's a look at downtown Windsor. It's looking a little dark out there right now. Windsor, Essex is under a severe thunderstorm watch. Chatham-Kent is under a severe thunderstorm warning. This storm could bring wind gusts of up to 90 kilometers an hour and the potential for nickel to ping pong ball size hail. We chat with Colette Kennedy after the break. They might be named after the month of May, but those pesky mayfly swarms are still around in mid-July. They've recently been seen in parts of Windsor, Essex County. One expert breaks down why.
Very typically, the mayflies will swarm up to 3 to 4 weeks. They initiated their swarms back in the second week of June, so we're probably close to the very tail end of them right now. It's completely normal. Basically, what cues a mayfly to emerge is the temperature at the bottom of the sediments where their nymphs are living. And because different areas of the Huron-Erie corridor will warm up at different rates, those different subpopulations are cueing in onto how fast the water is warming up in their particular areas. So areas where you got cooler waters, it takes them longer to emerge versus the earliest emergences usually come out of shallow embayments where the water warms up really quickly. One of the biggest things that we've seen, at least across years, you'll remember a couple of years ago we had some of the highest water levels on records. And then typically in those areas, because we had so much of a water mass, the warming up of the water was a lot slower. So that was quite a bit delayed. This particular year, it's probably just a spatial phenomenon. As I said, different areas are warming up a little bit faster than others. And typically in these latest groups, they're going to be the mayflies that basically hatched out near the shipping channels where it's a little bit deeper, and it just takes those cooler water masses to warm up. It takes them longer. Very typically the peak really comes out towards the end of June, and then you sort of see these straggler populations that come out. So I expect maybe this and next week, and that'll be the end of what we're seeing for our hexagenia.
And our meteorologist Colette Kennedy is here now with the weather. Oh, Colette, I'm excited about coming back, but the fish flies, all the bugs I could do without.
Yeah, I find it the most difficult when riding a bike. Or I suppose jogging too, but when they just come at you, there's nothing you can really do, right?
Yeah, they're in your mouth. They're places you don't want them to be.
That's right. Best you can do is just swallow, I guess, and take the protein. All right, folks, let's get into it and talk about what's going on out there, because we do have some pretty active weather. Obviously, the area you see here in red, that's the severe thunderstorm warning, but we still have even a watch for Windsor, meaning conditions favorable for severe storms to develop. But in this region, we've actually been seeing them happening, and this is kind of round 2 that's moving through. We're going to get to the radar in just a moment, but I do want to show you already it's having an impact as this cold front is coming through, or at least the storms ahead of it, bringing the temperature down a little bit, and the humidity will be coming down too. Goderich at 24 for a humidex, Windsor at 33. So we're going to find that keeps falling off. There's a look at the lightning strikes associated with it. So this real cluster that we're now seeing coming through here, Chatham-Kent, kind of just north of, up towards Sarnia and stretching and pushing back towards London, which is, again, this is the second round. Take off the lightning strikes and you can get a better look. And some of these areas where we're seeing some of the pink and red, quite likely getting some hail in there. I've heard, there are different ways you can describe it, whether it's ping pong or it's toonie size or golf ball. Yeah, a quarter to up to kind of that size is what we're looking at there. And then with those heavy downpours, you can get into some flash flooding, but certainly the winds, those gusty winds, that can be quite damaging. Some of those potentially up to 80 or 90 kilometers an hour. I did just want to focus in, still another cell, still a little bit more redevelopment back to the west. These likely are going to be weakening, but there's still that potential there. So give it another hour, an hour and a half or so, and then we'll see a lot more improvement once we get behind this thing. But you can just see it here. Let me throw the cold front on, just how expansive that particular line of this front is, and the line of storms stretching all the way up past the nation's capital into Quebec. And there are some warning storms up there as well with some of the stronger cells in that region. So back in we go. Let's take you through the timeline, move that on through. Probably, I would say even after about 8 o'clock, we should be looking really good. And even once this kind of line that's going through now is gone, what's behind it, they're more isolated. Now, Wednesday, got to tell you, we're going to see some light showers developing, turning heavier with some embedded thunderstorms. So we may get a break in that precipitation, and it's lighter in the morning, but then can become heavier as we get into the afternoon and evening tomorrow. I do want to tell you, though, that the models are pushing that further and further south. So I was looking at us maybe seeing 30 millimeters of rain, and maybe it's going to be only 15 or 20 in there. 25 degrees. So cooler tomorrow for a couple of days, and then all bets are off and the temperature going right back up again.
Oh, looks like there's going to be some turbulent weather. What do you think, Colette? Some scared dogs tonight? I know
the lightning and the thunderstorms. I know it's awful. It's like fireworks almost.
I know, those poor things. Well, thanks so much, Colette. We appreciate that.
You got it.
Why are you paying different prices for the same item at a popular fast food joint? We have that story coming up after the break. Well, for the exact same item off the menu, prices at McDonald's can vary location to location. And we're not talking Toronto to Tokyo, but even just a few kilometers apart in the same city. The CBC's Danielle Nerman explains.
Would you pay 40% more for your fast food fix? Well, you might be already, depending on where you order. Everywhere you go, McDonald's tastes the same. But want to know what's not the same? Prices.
The prices for, say, chicken nuggets across McDonald's in the city is varying from $11 to $16. That's really shocking.
He's right. When you compare the price of a 20-piece chicken McNuggets at every McDonald's location in Calgary, the cheapest are $11.69 and the most expensive are $16.39. Similar price variations can be found in cities across Canada. Why? Well, according to the McDonald's corporate website, most of its restaurants are franchises, and the owners set the prices. That's why two McDonald's just a few minutes drive from one another can have big price differences. I talked to David Hopkins about this. He's a longtime Canadian restaurant consultant. He says when it comes to pricing, it's all about knowing your customers and what they're willing to pay.
It's what the market will bear. I remember the first time I had a Starbucks coffee in Niagara Falls, and I was absolutely shocked at the price. It was something like 40% more for the same coffee. But that's just market, tourist market, and they know they can charge more, so they do.
According to the Canadian Franchise Association, it's not unusual for menu prices at any franchise to vary. If rent is higher in one neighborhood than another, well, that might be why you're paying a few more bucks for those nugs. If you're not loving it, you can keep driving or use the McDonald's app to shop around. It will tell you if you're getting the best price for your Big Mac.
Well, it's not exactly Jurassic Park, but a new attraction in Brazil lets you walk among dinosaurs and learn about the Earth's past. A 2-hour trip from Rio de Janeiro takes you more than 200 million years back in time. The land of the dinos features 40 life-size animatronic dinosaurs tucked into the Brazilian rainforest. 30 of the creatures were bought in China and shipped to Brazil. The others were created locally. The park covers about 1.5 square kilometers and bills itself as the world's largest dinosaur park. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media too. As usual, The National is tonight at 10 on CBC TV and streaming. Thanks for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow night.